Welcome to Houston Sports Talk with your host, Robert Land.
Thanks for checking into the best Houston sports podcast, part of the National Bleav Network. And back with me to talk Rockets, Cooper Klein, Rockets Chop Shop contributor and co-host of the NBA Draft podcast, Upside Swings, which is heating up. It's March, of course, and you got to go check out his work over there. And Cooper, March, it's a great time for basketball, but I'm just starting to get a little bit depressed because the Rockets just have 11 regular season games left. That's it. I know there's playoffs, but it's one of my favorite regular seasons ever in Rockets history.
Yeah, hard not to just be enjoy this year, especially just because of how the last few years have gone. The last few years have just been so awful. You know, last year was all right. We at least went 500. I mean, we were the best non-playoff team of all time, which kind of stings. But yeah, the season has been so fun. And even with the injuries, even with some of the struggles, we're still fighting for second in the West, which is an insane thing to say. I think if you had asked me beginning of the year where we'd be 11 games out, I would not be saying that. So it's just so fun. And it looks like the future is going to be even more fun as we continue to build and get better and better. You know, as sad as it is, it's hard not to be excited with playoffs coming up for the first time in a while, the success of the future shining on us.
Sadly, the Rockets' 9-game win streak ended Sunday, and we saw an issue that's bothered me all season long. No Jokic, so Murray just goes off. Jamal Murray, but Coop, Udoka, he just takes too long to adjust. This is a recurring issue. And by the way, the last thing I was expecting to see nearly everybody, and I mean everybody, but Amen defending Jamal Murray. I mean, what is that about? It's just like he doesn't get to that guy that's going off until, you know, third or fourth quarter sometimes.
It's hard, especially when you lean so heavily on the double big lineup that, I mean, just basically is Jamal Murray candy, you know, punishing bigs who drop too far, bigs who are slow in rotation.
Yeah, I heard Kelly Eco talking about this on the Athletic NBA podcast, but no, that's incorrect. The double big lineup was not the issue because the one guy on the entire Rockets team that was in the plus was Steven Adams. He was +9. Everybody else was minus. So the double big lineup did not kill them last night. That was not the issue. To me, it's just it came down to Jamal Murray. There's other issues. It was, you know, obviously, you know, you can't get like whatever it was, 11 for 34, 12 for 34 from Jalen and Fred VanVleet. That's a problem. But you got to guard Jamal Murray, and you can't do it by throwing a bunch of Fred VanVleet, Jalen Green at him, or even Dylan Brooks.
Yeah, if you're going to start Amen, you got to at least use, like, if you're so committed to this bit of not starting Jabari, but also, you know, starting Dylan and only really starting 1 or 2 plus rebounders in a team that has only succeeded because of rebounding this year, then just throw him on the player who's going off. Don't try and pretend that you're running the same when it's not working. When I talked about the double bigs lineup, it's more of a schematic issue. I think Steven Adams is incredible, but it's more of a lack of any kind of scheme to kind of throw at a guy like that when your main thing doesn't work. They didn't switch to a switch defense. They didn't switch to any kind of hedge and recover. They didn't switch to, you know, any kind of different pick and roll coverage. It's more just this inability to make any kind of adjustment until it's too late, until the game's gone or until something changes. It's really upsetting. It took too long to change the starting lineup and keep Amen out of the starting lineup. And then they do make the change. And now that it's like, well, it stinks because we have no second rebounder, and Dylan Brooks and Amen do not make sense as your 3 and 4. Like, at the end of the day, they're both good, whatever, but they don't work together without another big. And now they're not going to adjust to that. It's just been a consistent pattern of just refusing to adjust to very obvious things.
Yeah, there's another adjustment I'm going to get to in just a second. But I mean, when you look at what they've done this year, you know, I'll give you another example. Quentin Grimes. Does he have to get to 40 before you start trapping him? I mean, the 76ers are running out a G League lineup, and the Rockets are just letting Quentin Grimes set fire over and over and over again. You got to make an adjustment. They shouldn't be down by 25 against the Sixers because you're afraid to trap Quentin Grimes. You're afraid to try to get the ball out of his hands. it drives me nuts. Also, Udoka made the same mistake he makes nearly every time the Rockets are losing big. When he finds a lineup that gets them back in the game, we saw this in the fourth quarter Sunday night. He sticks with that lineup too long. They run out of gas and they can't get over the hump. This speaks to a gripe for Udoka, as far as I'm concerned, that just drives me crazy. Like too many NBA coaches, Cooper, he can't figure out fatigue's a real thing. This is not fake news. He overplayed Amen as a starter. We saw the flaws after a month, after he was playing him 38, 39 minutes a game. On Sunday, he plays VanVleet 42 minutes in a game where Fred was just bad. And Fred is not the guy that you run out there all these minutes coming off a couple of ankle injuries, a 37-point game the other night. And then he's 2 for 12, and he's 1 for 8 from 3. His D, not terrible, but it was not helping the Jamal Murray explosion. I'm just saying, Coop, this is not NBA 2K. It's not NBA 2K. These guys get tired legs. It's not robots out there. They're going to get tired legs. You got to switch things out. I don't care what kind of run they're on. Eventually, they can't play 12-minute quarters. Sorry.
It doesn't matter how good of an athlete you are. We're seeing the best athlete in the NBA, Amen Thompson, getting run ragged by Udoka. That's ridiculous. Amen is great. I have been screaming for him to get as many minutes as possible since the second we drafted him. At some point, you're overdoing it when you're asking him to play point guard sometimes, screen and be involved in just about every offensive possession, crash the offensive boards, crash the defensive boards. Hey, also go lock down their best player. Hey, can you also play off-ball defense and be our best shot blocker? Hey, can you also, you cannot be playing that many high leverage, high intensity minutes outside of the playoffs. And I get you're trying to get there, but at a certain point, you got to act like a playoff team. You got to conserve your minutes. You're fighting for the 2 seed, but a few minutes of Nate Williams, a few minutes of, guys who are good, off the bench, who we have signed to play minutes because this is a really high demand defense, a really high demand team when you're crashing the boards this much. You can't be playing 8-9 guys in a rotation. You need to be digging into your bench. They exist for a reason. I get Jeff Green can only play once every 3 games and he kind of stinks. And, Aaron Holiday can't defend. Reed Shepard's hurt. But you need to be finding minutes for these guys and finding spots for them to play.
Aaron Holiday would have been perfect last night for 5 or 10 minutes. When Fred can't hit the broadside of a barn, his defense is basically worthless against Jamal Murray, who's just shooting over everybody. It doesn't matter. Denver's got a big lineup. They're playing big. They're an unusually big team. And Jamal Murray is not going to be stopped by Fred VanVleet getting his hand up. So this would have been a perfect at least Aaron Holiday might have had a shot at making some 3-point shots. And the Rockets just, they couldn't make anything. I mean, I know that, the geeks out there will be going, well, yeah, but look, the Rockets weren't getting the offensive rebound as much as normal or whatever. Or, the Nuggets got fast break points or whatever in that particular. The reason they got fast break points is when you keep missing shots, you're not getting every rebound. And at some point, when you're not getting every rebound, the Nuggets can get out on a fast break. And I want to point this out too, Cooper. I know we've talked about Jabari, bringing in Jabari back into the starting lineup. And, who should he come in for? Should he come in for Amen or Dillon Brooks? I'm at the point with Dillon Brooks. No, the guy's shooting too darn well. To say he's like an elite 3-and-D guy, I wouldn't say that because I think the D some nights is not as good as other nights. The 3 is actually more consistent than the D is these days, but the 3 is so valuable to the Rockets. I don't want him out of the starting lineup right now. And I am at the point where, and I know they missed Fred. I know there were things that they missed about Fred, but I Bleav that he's the guy that should come off the bench, and either Tari or Jabari should be moved into the starting lineup and let Amen and Jalen run those first unit offense. And that way, I think it helps Fred's legs, in the middle to late in games when you need Fred's legs and you need his decision-making and you need him out on the floor. And I like where the Rockets are going, where they're thinking, because when they play big, I think that is their advantage right now. And you have Amen. Use that advantage of Amen is a big guard as opposed to, hey, let's go tiny because tiny is not working for the Rockets. We know that. We've seen it over and over. You and I we're going to talk about the double bigs as a lineup construction and how that works and everything in a second. So I don't want to get there, but I think if you're going to go big and you're going to lean into it, then Amen Thompson should be maybe in the starting lineup instead of Fred. It doesn't mean Fred VanVleet maybe doesn't get 25 or 30 minutes, but just, maybe start Tari and Jabari instead of Fred, instead of taking out Amen, because the starting lineup it's not the same, obviously.
For me, it's just like Ime is not recognizing what makes the team good. What makes the team good is that they're absurdly athletic and they're huge. And that, Jalen's been better on the rebound on the boards this season, at least like from a visual standpoint. I don't have the numbers to back that up. But your advantage is the fact that you out-rebound teams just about every night. You go out there, you're putting up a historic rebounding season because you have two of the best rebounding bigs in the league. You have the best offensive rebounding guard, if you count Amen as a guard. You have all these guys who can just grab boards, eat boards. And you start one of them, and it's the shortest one. You start Amen, and you basically are like, hey, get out there and keep us relevant. But also, you need to go out there and get stops and play help defense because Dylan and Jalen can't do it, and Fred's short. And it's just like, I understand that Amen is so good that you kind of have to pick your poison with him in terms of what is he going to do. Where's he going to, add power to this lineup? What's he going to do for you? And he's not going to be in the other spots. But at some point, let him do what he does, that you have other guys that can back it up. Let him play off ball. Let him rebound. Let him work in the areas where he succeeded early in the season, where he was able to just play super high energy ball and not relying on him to be a stopper all night. But it's hard stuff. And I do really like your lineup. I think Amen, Jalen, Jabari, Dylan, and Sengun is probably our best lineup at the moment.
I'd put Tari instead of Jabari personally, but because I do like Jabari coming off the bench and multiple positions.
Yeah.
And I think he's better offensively when he's come. I have been saying this for God knows how long, that Jabari going against bench units offensively and getting him away from Sengun and Dylan and Jalen taking all the shots around him would help him offensively. And I feel like it does help him offensively. But I mean, it was ridiculous that last night you got Fred out there playing 42 minutes and Jabari gets 17 minutes. You know what? Let's talk about I think we're leading into the double big. So let's delve into that in just a second. But before we roll on, I'm just so excited. March Madness is here, and you guys should be too, because every game's a shot to make a little extra cash. MyBookie's Bet and Get is back to sweeten the deal. Place a cash bet on March Madness and get a surprise reward. Hey, free bets, cash back, bonus chips. You never know what's coming next. Maybe it's a number 1 seed rolling. Come on, Coogs. We're going to get to them in just a second. Or an underdog shocking the world. Smart bettors know the real money is made one game at a time. You can sign up right now. I'll put the link in the description with the promo code MM50. MM50. You can boost your bankroll with a deposit bonus designed to help you make the most of your money. If you don't want a bonus, that's okay too. Just make sure you let them know we sent you. The link again in the show description, along with that promo code MM50. So bet on every game, anytime, from anywhere, only with MyBookie. All right, Cooper, you and I have not spoken since the double bigs became a thing. So, Coop, what's your take on Udoka's new weapon?
I think it's funny. Honestly, it's great, and I really enjoy watching it. But it harkens back to something that I have noticed in Sengun's prospect tape, right? And that is that his best passes have always been interior passes to bigs. That's why his best passes are to cutters, to a cutting Jabari, Tari, or Amen. And his best passes when he was in Turkey were to a second big man who's also high-low actions. They don't do them much anymore, but they used to do a lot of high-low actions in Cleveland with Jarrett Allen and Evan Mobley, where they set one guy up on the three-point line or the high block, and then you hit the other guy down low once he's sealed his man off. Sengun looks like he is playing his brand of ball. He doesn't look like he's a fish out of water. This is what he knows. This is what he grew up playing. This is far more common in Europe just because of the defensive 3 seconds rules. But these guys are both pretty decently mobile. They take up a ton of space, and that we're just so dominant on the boards that you can kind of get away with not playing the best defense or most efficient modern defense ever. And they still play good defense together because they're both huge and they can both kind of move their feet enough to survive. They can't either be picked on. It's really, really fun basketball. And in a time when people spend more time than ever complaining about, oh, all anybody does is shoot threes. I mean, we're watching two back to the basket centers get minutes together like it's 2003. This is awesome. So I've been really enjoying it. I do think that there's not very many teams that can counter it. I think it'll be really fun if we see OKC in the playoffs to go against, Chet and Hartenstein and those two guys. See double big on double big, go head to head. But I'm really excited. I do think it gives you some weird schematic weaknesses against very specific guards, but you're not leaning on it because you need it. You pull it out when you want to shove somebody's face into the mud and get every single board and be everywhere.
Can you explain why maybe Sengun is going off offensively with Steven Adams out there? What about Steven Adams helps him offensively? Is it just the confidence of knowing that I don't have to work quite as hard defensively? Is that it? Or is there something that Steven Adams being out on the floor helps him from an offensive standpoint?
I think it's an offensive standpoint, partially because people don't talk about this much because he's a center. But there's this whole obsession in the NBA with jumbo playmakers, right? Like guys who are 6'6" plus who can run a pick and roll. And guess who is one of those guys who we have not talked about this season? It's Sengun. He's one of the most efficient pick and roll runners in the NBA. He has been insane as a guy who can run a pick and roll. So you have Steven Adams who can get out there, set really hard screens, allows him to get into his stuff. But also just if he's running actions with somebody else on the perimeter, Steven Adams is down low. He's so good at post-entry passes, setting up Steven Adams to get other passes. He just knows how to play off of another big man offensively. Just playing in Europe, it makes sense to him, and it works for him. It's how he played for most of his life. And I think defensively, it also helps where he's able to play more like relying on his hands instead of having to play out at the level, then recovering, and then also jumping and contesting shots. He has really good defensive hands, and he's really able to utilize that. And I don't think it expends as much energy from him as playing like a traditional five and trying to be more airborne and staying vertical and all that kind of stuff, while also, containing guards. And Steven Adams is just good at that stuff. He knows how to do it. He's a tenured vet. He knows his stuff. So I think it's been a really effective duo for a lot of reasons. It's not just like a flash in the pan type thing.
Yeah, it's funny because everybody would think, well, you got Steven Adams and Sengun, you got two non-shooting big guys. How is that helping Sengun? Even some lineups where they've had Amen out there. So you got three guys that can't shoot. And I always say, get three guys that can pass, three guys that are smart, and three guys that can play basketball. I think it's just sometimes we talk about spacing and it just gets to be overrated when, you have guys that just know how to play basketball. And that's a big part of it. And here's something, Cooper, that I think is, I talked on Thursday. I had on Bryson, aka Red Nation blogger, and I told him, I said, look, the Rockets literally look like a mediocre team the last few weeks without the double bigs. The numbers bear it out over the last 15 games. And it was just posted in the last 24 hours. The Rockets are plus 19.6 per 100 possessions with Steven Adams on the floor. That's how good the Rockets are with Steven Adams. And minus 0.4, so basically dead even, like I said, without him. So think about it, Cooper, against a weak schedule. We're talking about a weak schedule, not like playoff teams. The Rockets are breaking even. That's it without Steven Adams, but they're crushing teams with him. That's the difference that this guy makes. And as we talked about the other day, this isn't just any guy, any big you throw in the mix here. This is Steven Adams, and he's the difference, not the fact that he's 7 feet and he can rebound a little bit and stuff. I think it's the fact that he's so special at a lot of stuff, the screens, the passing, all of this,
He's a really funny story because he came out to get drafted and didn't even think he'd get drafted when he came out. He goes in the lottery, goes to OKC, such a huge part of their success there. This is a guy averaging like 6 points and 6 rebounds and comes out And he's just so smart. He knows how to play the game. It's really kind of slept on. He's another one of those guys, reminds me a lot of Nene, where Nene came in and he wasn't like the best individual rebounder, but he was so good at boxing out. He was so good at screening guys, getting guys out of the way, that despite the fact he couldn't really defend and he wasn't super mobile, your team was still better with Nene on the floor, right? Because he just does the big man stuff that needs to be done. And Sengun, when part of what you lose when you have a star center like Sengun, the Nuggets have kind of dealt with this, but have brought in guys like Aaron Gordon, Jeremy Grant in the past, guys who make up for this with hustle, like Christian Brown. But you lose a lot of the big man jobs, right? And that's sort of made up for when you have guys like Amin and Tari. But when those are also, kind of your guys, or they're not playing as much, like Tari doesn't get as many, he doesn't start. You lose sort of that, the traditional big man stuff. And I think Steven Adams is just so damn good at it. And he just makes your team so much better by being on it, just being on the floor. He knows how to play the right way, knows how to pass, knows how to defend, even though he's kind of physically limited. They had him in that weird hedge system to start the year. He's looked a lot better as the year's gone on, and he's kind of figured it out. They've kind of adjusted it a little bit. But I really like what you said. Just give me three guys who can pass, who can play ball, and who know the game. That's what it really matters. People worried when we drafted Amin, how's he going to be able to play with Sengun? He can't shoot. It doesn't matter. They can both dribble, they can both pass, and they're both smart players. And that matters more for spacing than anything. Being able to cut, move off ball, set screens, that is just as important, if not more important, for certain teams for spacing than just raw three-point percentage. I think it's a really good example of some concepts that I really enjoy.
Adams has rebounded 22.5% of all Houston misses in his minutes, which would be the highest single season offensive rebound percentage in recorded NBA history, which goes back to the 73-74 season. Just for context, 500 plus minutes on that. Just amazing, crazy stats. Follow Steven Adams' stats on X if you aren't already, because I feel like every day I get a new appreciation of what he's doing out there. And let me throw this curveball at you, Cooper. Is there a bread and butter offensive play the Rockets should run in the playoffs? Is there something that you've seen them do? Because everybody talks about how are they going to do this offensively in the playoffs? What are they going to do? What are they going to do in the fourth quarter? Is there something that you would like to see them run more, or something that should be their bread and butter play from what you've seen, because maybe it's their best playoff option late in games?
If I was the Rockets offensive coach, I would run the entire offense around Amin and Sengun pick and rolls. I don't think we see enough of them. And when we do see them, it's awesome. We do also get a lot of Sengun short roll with Amin as a cutter, but that's not as common. I think just if you can find a way to get Fred involved as an off-ball shooter, either have him as a screener and run a double screen, set up Sengun, have Sengun as the initiator, Amin and Fred as screeners, have Fred get to an open spot and have Amin roll with Sengun. I think you're cooking with grease. Get both guys going downhill, potentially set up mismatches. You can have Amin in the short roll, making quick decisions, passing out to shooters. Ideally, one day, this is Reed. This is what Reed does. He plays on and off ball, and he does that, but not this season. Not this season. So,
good news. Good news, though. Reed Shepherd was out there shooting. I just saw this right before we went on, and I saw a note that he might be 1 week away. So we might actually see Reed Shepherd before the season ends.
That would be nice. I'd like to see Reed get some more reps. I want to see him get more minutes, just get more comfortable. I doubt he'll be a playoff guy, but if you can have him get out there, take some minutes from Fred, take some of that load off Jalen, just get more confident, and we can, continue to evaluate what he looks like as a part of our future. I was talking about it the other day with somebody, but that OKC game is pretty arguably the most impressive single rookie game any of the rookies we drafted over the last 4 years have played. The other one for me would be the Jabari game against Giannis, where he held Giannis to like 7 points. That would probably be my answer. But I mean that Reed game against OKC is ridiculous still. So he looked like a different level of guy. But I'm excited. Do you have a play that you want to see him run in the playoffs?
Well, I feel like the best option for the Rockets right now, if Fred's in the lineup and Jalen's in the lineup, so we're talking about the starting lineup pretty much, it's going to be, something with Jalen and Sengun doing a pick and roll. And then that way you've got Fred and Dylan as the guys out there ready to shoot with, the dunker spot, Amen. That way everybody is in their right position because, if it's something that requires a Fred Sengun pick and roll, then it might not be as ideal because I just feel like his best area is just spotting up right now. That's what I want him to do. And then maybe making that second read, that second pass, that second thing out of that action. I don't think he's like a first action point guard as much. I don't think he's great there, but I feel like at that point, and Jalen, we have seen, and we talked a little bit about Jalen a few days ago with Red Nation Blogger, and I think he is getting a little bit better as far as passing is concerned. The assists have gone up recently, so maybe that's it. But yeah, it's very hard for me to figure out the starting lineup thing that I think they would be best at. Right now, the double big is their best offense in a lot of ways, just because I think Sengun's playing with so much confidence. Just give Sengun the ball wherever and let him start initiating right there. And, you got Steven, whatever he's doing, running screens or as an option for him to throw to, and then he can make the next pass or that sort of thing. But I just feel like Sengun is like a whole other guy, like we talked about earlier with Steven Adams on the floor. I mean, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I think another reason that Sengun just looks so much better with Steven Adams is that it's a lot more clear where the help is coming from in terms of if he gets doubled in the post. So usually with Steven Adams on the floor, you can't really send a 4-man at Steven Adams. So you have your 4-man on Sengun, and then you have your 5 on Steven Adams. If you're going to send help, you are leaving Steven Adams. Somebody else has to rotate. The chain of events is so much simpler and is much more in Sengun's wheelhouse. My biggest critique of him as a passer has always been that his kickouts are really lackluster. He is a really good interior passer, a really talented interior passer who sees a lot of really interesting angles, who just is really subpar at kickouts.
Great point. Yeah, I 100% agree with you on that.
Yeah, and it's just I think it allows him to just get back to making the kind of passes that he can make, and he's really great at making. And we're playing into our best players' strengths, and that's what makes it good. And sometimes you just got to do that.
Yeah, no question. And I'm hoping the coaching staff starts to see some of this stuff as well. I also want to remind everybody real quickly, we want to hear your Rockets take. What do you guys think? What is their best play? What should they do? Let me know in the YouTube comments. And in case you missed that, I had a Vikings Insider breaking down the new Texans offensive lineman Cam Robinson and Ed Ingram. Are they any good? He tells us. And this week, I've got an Astros season preview coming up with a great guest. And don't forget to support us by subscribing on YouTube, giving us a thumbs up, and listening on the go with your favorite podcast app. All right, Coop, last thing we want to touch on, your Cougars. We got to talk about your Cougars. They are getting a little bit too boring and predictable for me. It's the same thing every year. Sweet 16. I mean, come on, yada, yada, yada. Who cares, man?
Sustained success in college basketball. How boring is that, dude? I've been kind of mean to Kelvin Sampson in the past. I've called him. I've been mean about his offense, about his lack of creativity. At some point, he's smarter than me. He's a smarter guy, a better coach than I am. We've lost some games that we shouldn't have lost because of things he's done, but that doesn't mean that he's not making the right calls. This season has been really impressive. Has completely turned Milos Uzan's season around. Came in, he looked really unconfident. He didn't know his game. Didn't really look like he fit in. I was kind of worried he was another Damian Dunn, where he just didn't fit what we wanted to do. I am so happy I've never been more wrong. Uzan, the last few weeks, has been insane. Great in the Big 12 tournament. He's been all right in the first few tournament games. Obviously good in the first one. But LJ Cryer looks like real LJ. This team is just so fun, right? I mean, I don't know if anything will ever be as fun as the first Jamal Shed year, where everybody practically died, and it was him doing it with Kyler Edwards and Tajay Moore. But this year comes pretty close. I feel really confident about this team that even in December, I was like, this team isn't making it past the first weekend. I'm really worried. They have a lot of holes. They don't have an identity. Tugler looks like the second best defensive player in the country behind Flag. He looks like an offensive player, which is insane. You still have Jawan Roberts doing his thing. It's really hard to poke a hole in this team. You know, they look tough. They look composed. They're just, I don't know, beating that Gonzaga team that was the best 8th seed of all time, but, you know, in the way they did. So tough. So tough. And I'm really proud of this team. It's been a fun year.
Just blows me away that the one issue that they had in the tournament is not being able to handle a simple trap. A Kelvin Sampson team that I assume, you know, just mad dogs on defense during practices. How can their guards not know how to deal with the trap? I'm guessing that's going to be corrected because everybody saw it. It's out there. So now everybody's going to, oh, we could trap the, well, we'll see what happens with that. The one thing that just really freaks me out here is, man, their schedule in the tournament. In other words, if you look at their KenPom, who they could be facing if everything lines up, and we've already seen Gonzaga, I better say it right, or Kelvin's going to get mad at me. But we've already seen Gonzaga. We've already seen that they're going to be playing Purdue, who's, you know, pretty good. And then it could be Tennessee, and then Duke, and then Florida. You know, of course, there could be upsets, but that's the way it's lining up, which is like a scary lineup from a KenPom standpoint. Their bracket right now, and this is my question for you, Coop, their bracket, Kentucky, Tennessee, and of course, Purdue. So that's where we are in this next region. Anybody in that group, do you think is a bad matchup for them, or you think they should be able to take care of all, well, 2 or 3 of those teams?
I'm not too worried about Purdue, knock on wood, but they're kind of a 2-man show, and a 2-man show at the 2 positions that the Coogs can play against, which is the big man, where they'll throw Tugler on him and give him hell, and the guard spot, where Uzan is going to probably make Braden Smith look like not an NBA player. That would be my official guess. They can always get hot. Purdue can always shoot, but I'm really not too worried. They have not seen a defense like the Cougars that is this athletic, that can actually protect the rim all season. Purdue's, the Big Ten is just kind of a cakewalk for big men. They do not see this kind of toughness. They do not see this level of aggressiveness. On the other side, Kentucky, I'm not too worried about. I don't sweat. Tennessee, obviously, Chaz Lanier can shoot the hell out of the ball. I mean, that guy, he's ridiculous, but he's a small guard. And we tend to give hell to small guards like that. Sakai Ziegler, also really good. My biggest worry from them is their big man, Milicic. That guy, I think, is an NBA player. He's a dribble, pass, shoot big man. He can really shoot it. And he's just tough. We have not seen a big man like him really this season. There aren't many like him in college basketball, a truly skilled big man who's that big. And that would be my one worry. But, there's not very many guys like JoJo Tugler in the SEC. There's not many guys like Javier Francis in the SEC. And A&M has kind of a similar front court to us, kind of a similar team composition and style in general. And that game was really close. It was a really close game, and A&M is a far less talented, far less skilled team than this year's Cougs, who can't shoot and can't shoot free throws. We're bigger than them at just about every position. Obviously, Duke's terrifying, and we'll see how that, if we get there. But I'm not too worried about Purdue. We'll see about Tennessee or Kentucky, but the SEC isn't scaring me too much this year.
I got to be honest, the tourney in general, it's been a tough watch. No real Cinderellas or major upsets, tons of blowouts. I read it's the largest average victory margin in a first round in tournament history, the most ever 25-point blowouts in a first round. I think there were about 10 of those. It also stinks that we're missing 2 of the top 5 draft picks, a couple of guys that I know you've looked at on that Rutgers team. The other thing, Coop, that when you talk about this tournament, is I just feel like maybe this is going and happening because I know that a lot of people don't think these guys in the room are doing a good job at times, and there's always gripes or whatever, but I actually think they're getting better and better at this. And that's a big reason why we're seeing not as many Cinderellas. I think they're kind of figuring out where to put these guys and what brackets and how to do all that. I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, this year had a few bad beats as far as like West Virginia not making the tournament over UNC and Gonzaga being underseeded. They have like a few small misses. They're always going to. It's a human committee after all. Even a robot would mess it up because it's made by people. But I do think that there's some validity to that. That there's just like, obviously St. John's losing is huge. But that also follows a long pattern of highly ranked, highly seeded teams who are unranked to start the year getting upset early. We're upset by a Power 5 team that's very talented and really came on strong to end the year. So it wasn't an unexpected upset by any degree. I really enjoyed the second round. I thought the second round was a lot better than the first round. Most of those games were watchable and very close down the stretch. I mean, that Maryland-Colorado State game, incredible. Derek Queen, I think he's going to be second on my board. A little bit of a secret this year. I think he is incredibly skilled.
Did he take 2 or 3 steps at the end?
2.5. He took the gather. And you know what? If you're gonna pull it at a kid for taking too many steps in a tournament game, people would be complaining if they had called it, and they're complaining because he didn't call it. I would much rather live in the world where they don't make calls like that. Even if it goes against my team, I want to see the end of a game be played and not be called by a ref.
Lots of good stuff on upside swings. You got to go listen to more of what Cooper is talking about on his show. He's at Alley_Coop on X. Love having him on the show talking about Rockets and everything and college basketball as well. Thanks for doing this, Coop. Appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks again for having me on. It's always a good time. We were kind of negative about the Rockets today, but it's still a great season. It's so much fun. You heard us at the beginning. This is one of the most fun seasons in forever. And we're only mean because we care.
Exactly.
So I'm looking forward to watching the next 10, 11 games and the rest of this tournament. So go Coogs.
Go Coogs.
You're listening to Houston Sports Talk.
Hey, don't forget to support us by subscribing and commenting on YouTube. You can always listen to us on Spotify, Apple, or your favorite podcast app. Tell your friends about us and share our show links on social media. Spread the word, everybody. Thanks for listening.